Today we unlock the mysteries of selling a house in 2023 with a comprehensive breakdown of all the potential costs involved. From conveyancing to marketing, agent fees to lender fees, we're going to guide you through each cost element. Our extensive state-by-state guide as well, where you can jump ahead at any stage. There's chapters below in the description. Plus, we're going to have a bonus tip at the end around auction costs. So let's dive in. Jaden, starting off on the top, what are the conveyancing costs associated with selling a home?
So a conveyancer is just a legal professional that specializes in property, but you can get a conveyancer, a lawyer to help you out here. Their job is to protect your legal interests. So they're going to be there to help draft up the contract, get all the legal documents together, potentially complete searches, and then ultimately help on the day of settlement to move the money from the sellers, or the buyers rather, giving you the money to pay out your bank and moving things around. So this is what I'd almost consider a non-negotiable cost. Now, I have had clients that try and do their own conveyancing and try and do their own legal work themselves, and trust me, anytime it's happened, it's been a nightmare. The reality is we don't understand how it works. Unless you're a lawyer background, moving money around PEXA, you need logins. If you're having to physically do checks, a lot of banks won't accept that anymore. They'll want to go through a settlement agent. It can be a nightmare. So conveyancing is a non-negotiable. One question I do get asked though is, should you go through a little conveyancer? Should you go through a big, high-tier firm, Harvey Specter style from Suits? Listen, horses for courses. Generally, you're going to pay a lot more for that name brand and they're going to do a similar job. What I would say though is you want to get a local expert. So every state has slightly different legal laws, different contracts. So if you're in Queensland, for example, you want to be working with a Queensland-based conveyancer or lawyer versus if you're in New South Wales, etc.
Now, the key here is that they're going to recognize if there's potential issues, such as special conditions that are in the contract that you need to be aware of because they're protecting your legal interests. Now, a conveyancer costs range from about $800 to $2,200 depending on what you're doing. So that's the first thing that you need to be aware from a cost perspective.
Yeah, and keep in mind, there was a story a couple of years ago about some buyers, a first home couple in Brisbane that bought a property. The contract fell over and they lost $100,000. Now, it was due to finance and issues with their bank, but if they had a really top-notch conveyancer or lawyer, they could have potentially helped them to avoid those issues. So definitely conveyancer, legal fees, like Nathan said, non-negotiable.
Now, when you are selling your house, there's going to be marketing costs. Now, Jaden, run us through what this looks like when you're looking to sell your costs. It is a cost you need to be aware of.
Yeah, so this is one that the real estate agents generally pepper, and I have a pretty diverse opinion about this. So I think definitely you want to spend some money on marketing for the basics. Things like being on real estate or domain.com.au is just a non-negotiable. Everyone, if you go online, that's where you're first going to be looking. But I know when I sold a place on the Gold Coast a couple of years ago, the agent sat down, we went to my house, we sort of pulled out their shiny brochure and said, well, here's our marketing package. We really recommend that you do a 2-page ad in the Courier Mail. You potentially do an independent website. Like my house was, it's a couple $100,000 house, nothing crazy. But there's a lot of stuff there where you need to sort of sort through and say, well, is this helping to promote the agent or is it helping to sell my home? So like I said, definitely as a minimum, you want to get online and you do have to pay to put in those listings. But Nathan, I know one big tip you said is the photography, which is interesting to sort of think about that makes such a big difference.
Yeah, look, I think photography is certainly something you don't want to skimp on. You want to go for the high spec photos. You want to get really nice pictures, 4K quality or whatever you can get. But that's one thing that you don't want to go cheap on. You want to get a professional to really present the property nicely. And we've all had it before where you've gone to a property, you've seen the pictures online, you're wowed by it, and it gets you into the property and the inspection to see if you're going to like it. So I think definitely you want to make sure you get the best pictures you can and you want to be online through real estate or domain.com.au. The others, well, talk to your real estate agent, see what they suggest. As Jaden said, have your filter on and make sure that you're not doing things such as putting an ad in the newspaper where you're probably not going to get much traction.
Yeah, other stuff that the agents generally recommend to have are things like the pamphlets. I guess you can take them or leave it. I know when I've gone to a bunch of opens on a Saturday, you end up home with 10 pamphlets and you end up looking at the listing on your phone or showing your friends the listing online. So are they really useful? Remains to be seen. And even the street signs, I've been to homes where they've got lights and digital boards and flags and things hanging off these crazy street signs that cost a bucket. But at the end of the day, you just need a sign that says for sale. Like I know it's going to depend on the property. If it's a multi-million-dollar property, it's probably going to be different to just a little old unit in the suburbs. So be guided by what people do in the area and even what you've found successful.
The other thing is I think you do need a floor plan, especially if you've got quite a large house, 3 or 4 bedrooms. A floor plan makes sense. A lot of people want to know what they're dealing with, and it helps them imagine themselves in that property. They can sort of figure out where they want to put their furniture. Now, each marketing campaign is unique, so the agent will help you through that. Looking at the average cost in 2023 in Melbourne, marketing costs range from $6,500 to $8,000. So we're talking quite sizable amounts of money. And even in Sydney, it ranged from $4,500 to $10,000. So you can spend quite a lot of marketing, but the main things, as we talked about, I think you need to focus on is great photos and be on realestate.com, domain.com, and make sure that, you think about the others as really an add-on that might not really move the needle all that much. Jaden, moving on to agent fees. Now, I know there's 3 ways the agents can derive their commissions. How do they look like, and can you explain each to me?
Yeah, so there's pretty much 3 models that agents will use. There'll be like a flat fee, so you might have seen a Go Gecko or someone like that, where they're like, it's $5,000, that's all you have to pay, nothing more, nothing less. They sell for more or less. There's a sort of percentage of sale model, which is probably the most common one, where the agents will say, if I sell your home, I'm going to get 1 to 3% of the sale price, plus GST and that sort of thing. And the third model, which was a big thing actually when I was on the Gold Coast a couple of years ago, was a bonus. They said, well, Nathan, I'm going to sell your home for a minimum of $1 million. I'm going to take 1% of that. But for every $10,000 over or every percent over, we get paid a bit of an upside. So they're the 3 models. Like I said, the most common really is going to be that percentage of sale.
Yeah, well, we'll run through the bonus model just so you know. So let's just say you've got a property and the agent says, if I sell it for more than $1 million, anything over that $1 million, I'm going to get 10% of that. So what it looks like is, in an example where you might have agreed that you'll pay a percentage of 1.5% up to $1 million, so that's $15,000, and 10% thereover, if they sell the property for, let's say, $1.1 million, you'll have to pay the $15,000 to $1 million, and then 10% of $100,000, which is another $10,000. So the total commission you'd pay in that instance is $25,000. So you can see where a bonus and a commission model might work. And it could be an incentive where you might go, well, if you sell it for under $1 million, you're only getting 1.5%. Cheaper for me as a seller, and you're motivated to get that price much higher over $1 million. Guys, remember, here at Hunter Galloway, we're a mortgage broker and deal with people Australia-wide. If you find value in our videos, please consider hitting that subscribe button, as it does really help out the channel. And a big thank you to all our subscribers for your support. Inspires us to create more content. We hope you enjoy. Jaden, moving on, the next cost is lender fees. Now, what happens with lender fees and how are they worked out?
Yeah, so this is assuming before you sell your house, you've got an existing mortgage on there. So when you sell the home, that loan obviously gets paid out. So a couple of fees to be aware of are a standard discharge fee. So that's what the bank charges for processing. Usually that's not anything crazy. It's about $350 or so. There's land title, some government fees as well. They're only a couple of $100 on top of that. The only time you'll have an exit or a break fee is if you had a loan from 10, 15 years ago. They were common practice back then. They haven't been around anymore. But also if you've got a fixed rate. So if you've got a fixed rate, you might have another 3 years left on your fixed rate term. Check in with your lender because there could be early repayment fees payable from there.
Now, the early repayment fees can vary. Like if you fixed in at 1% and the variable rates are at 6% and the fixed rates are at 6% as well, the banks will usually let you out of that credit contract at no cost because there's no real early termination fees. But if you fixed in at 10% and a rate's at 1%, well, you can have thousands of dollars. So the only time to be very wary about your discharge costs is if you are on a fixed rate, because they can be quite substantial. You can get an estimate from your lender. Now, the other fees, as Jaden said, generally the discharge fee is going to range for the bank between $150 to $1,000 is pretty much the cost to leave your bank if you're not fixed in. So they're pretty reasonable. Now, you will need to fill in a discharge form with your lender. If you've got a broker like ourselves, we'd help with that process. And the discharge process takes anywhere from 14 days to 21 days. So you don't want to be doing the discharge last minute. It is something you want to move quite quickly on. Your conveyancer usually will also prompt you on doing that and when you need to get that moving. Jaden, the next cost is styling costs. What is this cost and why do you need to do it, or why would one consider doing it?
So a bit like with an Instagram account, your styling and your photos are critical. Because at the moment, in the current market, most people are going to find your place online and they're going to make that first impression from the photos. So the styling does matter. And I'm sure you've seen listings online where they look a bit depressing, they're sort of dark photos, no light, and you think, no, click on, move on, it's not going to be the house for me. So styling can help. And generally what this means is the agent will recommend and say, well, get rid of your old furniture. It's common if you've already moved out of your home, for example, and the place is empty. And it can help sort of understand what that space can be used for, because it can be difficult if you just see an empty lounge room. It can seem small, it can seem like you don't have that much stuff there, and furniture and even just wall fittings and things like that can make it seem more homely. So the idea of styling is make it as appealing as possible. It can range, generally it's about $5,000 to $10,000 if you're going for a whole home package. They're putting in beds, kitchen tables, all the other stuff, paintings on the wall. But it can make a pretty big difference because, like I said, you're pretty much competing online, and it's almost like if they see the listing, it looks ugly, they're going to move on to the next one. So you want to get that person in the house.
And even if you decide not to go for a stylist, get your agent to give you some advice. They'll usually do it for free, where they'll say declutter this, or maybe put some money into the backyard, or maybe paint this wall, or do this or that. And there are some cost-effective strategies you might be able to work with your agent on how you can really style the property, but do it at a budget, or go to Kmart yourself. So instead of paying the $5,000 to $10,000, you might go to Kmart, get some trendy furniture with what you've seen online through Pinterest or Instagram, and try and emulate what you've seen, and you might be able to do it at a fraction of the cost. But definitely something you want to consider here.
I've also seen agents use some digital styling. So you might have, a bench that doesn't have a TV on it, and they can kind of make it look better for the listing. This can be good for the photos, but then when people actually go to the home, it can be a bit of a disappointment. So I guess take that again on the agent's advice and sort of understand different houses are going to need different levels of styling and different levels of presentation.
And remember to like, share, and subscribe to stay informed with all things property and finance. Moving on, let's talk about the state-by-state guide for all those viewers out there that want to know the exact costs in terms of commission for the agents that they might be looking at and what they expect to pay. Now, the conveyancing, the marketing costs, they're pretty standard across Australia, but we're going to talk about the agent commissions on the percentage model and how they differ from state to state. Jaden, let's start off with the ACT. What's a typical agent charge in terms of commission on the percentage model?
Yeah, so ACT's got a pretty big range. It can be anything from 1.5% to 3.5%. Anywhere in between, and like I said, depends sometimes on the property price to really determine that. New South Wales Metro, like around Sydney, it's about 2%. It's a bit more competitive there, so you can expect them to sort of sharpen up, and you can try and negotiate, I guess, up front as well. Northern Territory, same as the ACT, so 1.5% to 3.5%. Queensland, around 2 to 2.5%, sometimes up to 3%, depending on where you are. South Australia, Tasmania, even Vic, it's all around 1.5% to 3.5%. WA, same sort of situation. So it's going to depend on the agent, the agency, their situation. So even when you're going through this process, it can be worth talking to 2 or 3 local agents just to get a bit of a lay of the land, to understand what they're selling in. And even when I'm interviewing them, when I've looked for agents in the past, when I've sold properties, you want to kind of get a sense of what types of properties they've sold in the past, and even the results they've gotten, because they're always going to tell you, well, I sold it for 10% over. Well, if everyone's doing that, like, what are you doing extra on top of them to actually get that result?
Now, the last tip we have, which is a bonus tip, which is should you sell at auction and what are the costs associated there? So Jaden, starting off on the top, what are the typical costs of going to auction and having an auctioneer?
So on top of just the marketing costs, which we already explained, an auctioneer can cost anywhere from $400 to $1,000 just to have someone on the day to sort of, direct and call the paddles and that sort of thing. Definitely an experienced auctioneer can help. I don't know if you guys have seen The Block. I found it really interesting in that most recent season where you saw the more experienced auctioneers actually get pretty good results. Like, you can actually see the way they were working the crowd, the way they were sort of moving the tempo of the auction to get the right results. So I think that can really make a difference. And you want to obviously work with someone that your real estate agent has worked with before. Generally for the auctioneer, it's a fixed fee. So you might just pay them $500 on the day to turn up, plus you get to pay the agent's commissions and everything else. So from a seller's perspective, if you're selling a home, an auction can be fantastic because it means it's all over. They'll do a 3 or 4 week campaign. In a month's time, your home goes to auction. There's going to be no finance clause. There's going to be no cooling off periods. It sells on the day. You can move on, and at least you can move into your home in the 4 to 6 week period, depending on your state. But it also can limit your buyers, as we've spoken lots before. From the home buyer's perspective, it can be frustrating. It can be nerve-wracking. It can limit your market sort of pool that's available there, especially if it's first home buyers. They typically don't love going to auction if it's avoidable. So you probably have to weigh it up. And again, rely on the agent's advice a little bit around this. You got to understand the market conditions too. If it's a bit of a quiet market, you only have one person turn up an auction. It's not really an auction. It's going to get passed in. It's not going to sell. There's risks to that.
And did you know here at Hunter Galloway, we're a mortgage broker and deal with people Australia-wide. So if you've just sold your property and looking to get back in, we can help. Call us on 1300 088 065 or visit our website huntergalloway.com.au. Guys, as always, thanks for watching and we'll see you next time.